Ed Stafford climbs up to a cliffside cave to collect birds' nests, munching on crispy chicken-flavored hermit crabs and savoring superb sea urchins, then prepares himself a pot of bird's nest soup with shark fin, turning what should be a wilderness survival challenge into what looks like a paid vacation. This episode, Ed Stafford takes on the challenge of an uninhabited beach on Coron Island in the Philippines. The production team spends $1 to charter an 80-year-old nuclear-powered speedboat. The captain races across the waves, end of use in 25. The beach is bordered by ocean on one side and cliffs on the other 3. Ed knows fresh water will be his biggest challenge. Fortunately, he finds 6 coconuts washed ashore. Surveying the beach, he sees countless plastic bottles and trash. While useful for survival, the sight depresses him environmentally. After sorting useful debris, Ed explores further and discovers 2 papaya trees and bamboo, ideal building materials and food sources. During this dry season, a shelter isn't strictly necessary, but Ed crafts a comfortable bed anyway. Springy green coconut fronds underneath, dry brown leaves on top, creating a surprisingly soft sleeping surface. After this work, he cracks open a coconut on rocks to rehydrate, already feeling the physical strain of mild dehydration. That night, sleep proves impossible. Haunted by trauma from his previous 60-day island survival, Ed remains psychologically unprepared for this challenge. By morning, he develops a low fever and knee infection, forcing him to use emergency antibiotics. He spends the day recovering, sustained only by coconut water. On day 3, slightly improved, Ed faces dwindling supplies. Only 3 coconuts remain. Attempting to extract moisture from papayas, he bites into an unripe one, crunchy soap flavor. The flesh tastes literally like detergent. While searching for water, Ed finds an old nail and devises an ingenious fire-starting method. Placing the nail tip down in a glass bottle, he gently shakes it to create microfractures along the base. Soon, the entire bottom detaches cleanly, creating a perfect magnifying lens. Focusing sunlight through this makeshift lens, Ed ignites tinder effortlessly. No bow drill required this time. With renewed morale, he forages the receding tide's rocky pools at dusk, hoping for king crabs, but settling for hermit crabs instead. Miraculously, he finds a Mongolian-origin tin can washed ashore, perfect for boiling his catch in seawater to replenish salts. His first proper meal, crunchy chicken-flavored salted hermit crabs. The successful fire and decent food finally break his psychological block. After proper rest, Ed seriously begins his Coron Island challenge. Finding fresh water becomes priority 1. At low tide, he explores opposite the beach, making an astonishing discovery. Through a narrow stone passage, after about 30 steps right, a hidden cliffside lagoon appears. Aerial views reveal this paradise-like sanctuary. Ed immediately spots valuable resources, a large colony of edible sea urchins, peeling off spines and cracking them open, reveals the nutrient-rich golden gonads, packed with protein, vitamins, and fats. After sampling several, Ed notices mangrove swamps across the lagoon, with potentially freshwater sources in the hills beyond. If he were to find fresh water there, he'd first need to build transport equipment. Ed places bamboo over the fire to adjust its length, then arranges 3 poles into a triangular frame. The washed-up ropes on shore have become brittle, so he substitutes them with gathered vines. After securing the tripod frame, he layers fishing net across it. Using the sharp edge of the glass bottle base, he trims excess netting, then attaches plastic floats, completing his makeshift raft. Dog paddling across the lagoon, he reaches the mangrove swamp behind the crab lake. Scaling the small hill beyond, Ed searches desperately for water sources. Disappointingly, not only is there no visible fresh water, but even the soil feels parched and hard. Though he hasn't drunk water all day, Ed finds moisture through alternative means. Splitting open waterlogged wood in the swamp, he extracts wood-boring clams. Taste like oysters, actually pretty good. Encouraged, he finds an even larger specimen and pops it straight into his mouth. Munching sounds. After this unconventional breakfast, Ed reconsiders his water strategy. The limestone cliffs catch his attention. Their numerous crevices likely trap rainwater. Choosing a climbable section, he expends considerable effort, reaching a fissure's upper reaches. This time, success. A natural rock basin holds precious rainwater. Recognizing the water contains leaves, debris, and bacteria, he carefully collects 5 liters in bottles. Without drinking directly, back on shore, Ed constructs a filter, cutting the bottom off a plastic bottle, covering the neck with cloth, layering sand, charcoal, then more sand inside. This simple system removes large particles, sand, and odors, colors, charcoal. After filtering, he boils the water over his fire, now safe for drinking. With survival basics secured, Ed shifts focus to improving food sources, transitioning from mere survival to comfortable living. Those collected bottles prove useful again. He cuts their tops off and inverts them into the bodies, creating simple fish traps. Ed produces 10 such traps, placing them in rocky pools frequented by small fish. Returning along the shore, he spots a blacktip reef shark cruising nearby, immediately plotting its capture. Back at camp, he fashions a double-barbed hook from bamboo. This design lies flat when swallowed, but embeds when pulled back. Using unidentified crustaceans as bait, Ed sets 6 lines along the shark's patrol route. He also repairs the torn fishing net found earlier, deploying it across the crab lake's entrance, creating overlapping fishing systems. That evening and night, Ed checks his traps twice, only to find them empty. Even by the challenge's final day, neither nets nor lines yield anything. Losing hope, Ed checks his bottle traps. The 10th one finally contains a tiny fish. Hardly worth the audience's time, he mutters disappointedly, remembering locals harvest valuable swiftlet nests. From these cliffs for sale, Ed investigates a cave above the beach and miraculously finds several edible nests. Practicing restraint, he collects just one for cooking. Cleaning his minuscule catch, Ed combines it with the bird's nest in his salvaged tin can, preparing an improvised gourmet soup. Behind his campsite, Ed Stafford discovers a tamarind tree. The leaves of this tree are beneficial for human digestion, so he adds a few to his cooking pot for flavor. After boiling for just 5 minutes, he can't wait to taste the results. The bird's nest hasn't fully dissolved yet, it still has a noodle-like texture. But the soup itself is incredibly flavorful, enriched by both the fish and the bird's nest. Ed can actually feel the nutrients replenishing his body. This is undoubtedly the best meal he's had during this entire challenge. Just as he finishes eating, the captain arrives in the nuclear-powered speedboat, marking the successful conclusion of the challenge. The starvation expert, who went hungry for 3 days at the start, has finally caught a break. His fishing traps, which took 2.5 days to build, are now yielding consistent catches. His bird traps aren't far behind, providing him with a feast before the challenge even ends. Feeling ambitious, Ed even considers hunting a warthog, but instead, he luckily stumbles upon a tortoise. He roasts it thoroughly in a fire pit and enjoys its tender, juicy meat. This time, Ed Stafford ventures to Namibia, in southwestern Africa, a land of deserts and wildlife. It's the tail end of the dry season when he arrives. After being dropped off at the challenge site in the production team's tiger tank, Ed promptly strips off his shirt, leaving only his shorts, and sets off bareheaded into the wilderness. In desert survival, finding water is always the top priority. Ed straps on his pack and locates a dried-up riverbed. Following it upstream increases his chances of finding remaining water sources. Soon he observes both good and bad signs. Good. Fresh baboon droppings, proof that if baboons can survive here, so can he. Bad. The skeleton of a large antelope, likely killed by a leopard, a potential threat. As he walks, Ed keeps an eye out for useful resources. He spots a desert raisin bush, traditionally used by the Sand People as a fire drill. He takes a piece with him and continues upstream. After several hours, the riverbed narrows, and the vegetation thickens, a promising sign. Peering through the foliage, Ed spots a lake teeming with birds and animals, potential food sources. Surprisingly, instead of drinking directly from the lake, he digs a hole nearby, using the soil as a natural filter. After gulping down the bacteria-laden water, he turns his attention to shelter. He selects 2 trees, planning to sleep in one of them that night. Before dark, he needs to start a fire both for warmth and to deter predators. Thanks to the dry environment, fire-making materials are easy to find. Ed quickly assembles a hand drill and gets to work. Sparks appear almost immediately, and with a few gentle breaths, the tinder ignites. He builds a fire and encircles it with stones to prevent spreading. Next, he gathers thorny branches to create a protective barrier around his camp. That night, he sleeps in the tree, adding an extra layer of security. The next morning, Ed wakes up sore. Sleeping hunched over wasn't ideal. He decides to build a platform in a better-suited tree. Using 2 logs and the tree itself, he constructs a triangular frame, then lays wooden planks across it to create an elevated bed. Now it's time to set traps. But first, Ed needs a quick energy boost. He flips over rocks, collecting whatever insects he finds familiar or not, and pops them into his mouth. After his appetizer, he gathers fibrous plants for rope making. Back at camp, he pounds them with a bone to extract the fibers, then leaves them to dry in the sun. While waiting, Ed turns his attention to fishing. The lake is full of catfish, many swimming temptingly close to shore. He decides to use a natural cove near his camp, blocking off all but a narrow entrance with logs and rocks. Once fish swim in, they'll struggle to find their way out. With the trap set, Ed waits hoping for a big catch. However, the task took longer than Ed Stafford had anticipated. After completing half of the construction, he gathered the sun-dried plant fibers and returned to camp to weave them into rope. In no time, he crafted a snare, now ready to set up a bird trap. First, he collected seeds that birds love to eat. Using a bent tree branch as a spring, he attached the snare to its tip. On the ground, he arranged small sticks in a circle, propping up the snare with a trigger stick hidden inside. Any bird pecking at the seeds would activate the trap, causing the snare to tighten and lift it into the air. By the time he finished, dusk was approaching. Relying on sheer endurance, Ed lasted until early morning on the 3rd day. Before the heat set in, he gathered plenty of stones to complete his fish trap. Now, any gaps wider than 2 fingers were sealed shut. To avoid scaring the fish away, Ed left the lakeside to check his bird trap and was surprised to find it already triggered, with a bird caught inside. Returning to the lake, he noticed catfish swimming near the entrance of his fish trap. Seizing the opportunity, he circled behind them and herded them toward the trap. After a while, he checked his catch. No giant catfish, but 2 tilapia instead. This marked a dream start to his challenge. Plucking the bird and gutting the fish, he roasted them over charcoal. That night, Ed enjoyed his first protein-rich feast since the challenge began. The tender, flaky fish meat was fragrant and juicy. With a full stomach, he slept soundly until morning. Now he set his sights on a warthog. If he could catch one, the bacon, chops, and belly alone would last him. Until the challenge ended, Ed wasted no time. Following the warthog's tracks, he searched for a good spot to set a trap. Along the way, he caught the stench of rotting flesh. Tracking the smell, he found a long-dead antelope. Noticing bite marks on the carcass, he set up a camera nearby, hoping to identify the scavenger and assess whether it posed a threat to him. Moving on, he scavenged an old boundary marker, salvaging some wire, perfect for crafting warthog snares. By then, it was time to find food. His bird trap yielded nothing that day, but the fish trap delivered again, providing 2 more tilapia. Using the same cooking method, he enjoyed another meaty dinner. 2 nights of feasting left him overconfident. Fish alone no longer satisfied him. The next morning, he retrieved the camera from the antelope carcass. The footage revealed a lynx feeding at night. No threat to Ed. But the bigger discovery? A warthog had also visited the carcass. This gave him an idea. He surrounded the antelope with thorny branches, leaving only 3 entrances. At each, he set a wire snare, large enough for a lynx to pass through, but tight enough to strangle a warthog struggling to escape. Focused entirely on hunting warthogs that day, Ed forgot to check his fish trap during peak activity. That night, he went to bed hungry. The next morning, confident in his warthog trap, he even fashioned a stone axe, just in case he needed to finish off a trapped hog. But as they say, the higher the hopes, the harder the fall. Ed arrived to find his trap completely untouched. Dismissing it as bad luck, he set 2 more snares along the warthog's path, certain this would work. For the next 2 days, he obsessively checked the traps. Still nothing. Only when he saw the snares around the antelope carcass knocked over did he realize they were useless against warthogs. Worse yet, the lake's water level kept dropping due to drought, rendering his fish trap nearly ineffective. Now facing a full-blown food crisis, Ed reflected on his mistakes. Over-relying on the fish trap's success, he had poured all his energy into hunting warthogs, and now had neither. It was time to explore further afield. Day 9 of the challenge. Ed Stafford headed toward a nearby mountain. As soon as he broadened his perspective, his survival luck took a turn for the better. While resting at the summit, he noticed something moving on the ground. A tortoise. The local sand people consider tortoises a delicacy, and this unexpected protein source made Ed grin at the camera like a gleeful 70-year-old child. Without wasting time, he returned to camp, stoked the fire back to life, and quickly yet humanely dispatched the tortoise. He didn't let the precious blood go to waste, drinking it and remarking on its pleasant taste, feeling an immediate boost in strength. For the tortoise itself, he opted for an earth oven. Burying it under hot embers and soil, he waited 3.5 hours before digging it up. By then, the shell cracked open easily, revealing firm, succulent meat. The first bite sent waves of rich aroma straight to his brain, tender, juicy, and packed with flavor. Ed nearly devoured the shell itself in his enthusiasm. Fully revitalized, he felt ready for anything. Time flew by. Before he knew it, the challenge was coming to an end. Before leaving, Ed used the tortoise shell as a makeshift pot. He found a shepherd's tree, dug up its roots with a bone tool, crushed them, and added them to the shell. Then, he dropped in a scorching hot stone from the fire, letting it boil the water. After 3 minutes, he had himself a steaming cup of wilderness Luckin coffee. Sipping it contentedly, he reflected on how a simple hot drink could lift both spirits and morale in survival situations. With his pack ready, he doused the fire, gave his campsite one last glance, and set off. Another successful challenge completed. Bonus: the Arctic Challenge. Originally, the crew thought dropping Ed into freezing wilderness would leave him starving 3 meals short of 9. But once again, he achieved protein freedom. He discovered a beach teeming with mussels, picked the largest ones, filled his fur hat with them, and roasted them thoroughly back at camp. Cracking one open revealed plump, golden meat. Each bite a tantalizing delight for the taste buds, paired with crisp sea lettuce and giant geoducks as dessert. His meals were fit for royalty. Norway's Arctic wilderness. For this challenge, Ed Stafford was dropped in Nordland County, Norway, just 100 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, a true frozen wasteland. The production team insisted he go in completely alone, but to spare the editors the trouble of blurring him out, he reluctantly bundled up in full winter gear. As the chopper faded into the distance, Ed faced 10 days of solitary survival. Assessing his situation, he decided to descend toward the tree line. The snow varied from knee-deep to waist-deep, forcing him into a clumsy stumble. 3 steps forward, 1 fall down. To conserve energy, he switched to a butt-slide descent, letting gravity and his bladder do the work. Finally reaching the snow's edge, he arrived at the tree line, already feeling parched. Eating snow risked mouth ulcers and wasted calories melting it internally. Luckily, the ground was covered in moisture-rich moss. A squeeze yielded a quick drink. With thirst temporarily quenched, Ed focused on fire. Nightfall would bring temperatures as low as 20 degrees Celsius. He gathered vines for tinder and peeled bark from a silver birch tree. Its inner layer was highly flammable. His ideal tinder, dry grass, was nowhere to be found, soaked through by snow. As a last resort, he stuffed a handful into his pants, hoping body heat would dry it out. But for today, fire would remain a distant dream. Nightfall was approaching fast, and finding a suitable campsite became the top priority. As Ed Stafford made his way down the mountain, he spotted a relatively dry patch of ground and decided to settle there for the night. But just an hour after lying down, the cold became unbearable. He had to keep moving to stay warm, and as a result, he didn't sleep at all. At first light, he immediately set to work on his fire-making plan. While gathering materials, he noticed a small stream. Following it downstream led him to lower ground, where there was less snow and more dry wood. The stream emptied into a fjord, an open area with minimal snow. Ed set up camp above the fjord's waterline, freeing him to focus on fire. The grass he'd stashed in his pants the day before was now dry, but in such damp conditions, friction-based fire starting was unreliable. Instead, he found a red stone in the river, rich in iron oxide, and after a long search, he also scavenged a piece of metal and a dry chunk of fungus. With these, he could strike the metal against the stone to create sparks, catching them in the fungus to form an ember. Easier said than done. The sparks were tiny, and it took him the entire afternoon just to produce a single viable ember. Thankfully, the tinder and wood were dry enough that he quickly blew it into flames, building a roaring fire. In such extreme cold, a long fire stretching the length of his body would have been ideal for survival. But without proper tools to cut wood, and with the massive fuel demand of a long fire, he settled for a simple heart-shaped pit instead. With daylight fading fast, he didn't have time to finish his shelter. Instead, he propped up a tripod frame with a log, used stones as bedposts, laid planks across them as a platform, and topped it with branches for a makeshift mattress, keeping himself off the frozen ground. Then he spotted juniper berries on a nearby bush. Their blueberry-like taste marked his first real meal of the challenge. With the fire burning strong, Ed finally got a decent night's sleep. The next morning, he postponed further shelter work. His passive survival skills were running out, and it was time to hunt for food. No animal tracks were visible nearby. Hunger played tricks on his mind. For a moment, he even mistook water droplets under the ice for tadpoles. Pushing deeper into the woods, he finally found something edible, the only type of fern root native to the area. After gathering a pile, he sampled one. Its licorice-like flavor wasn't bad. With plenty available, he could stock up on carbs. Returning to camp, he was met with a shock. During his absence, a spring tide had surged into the fjord. The narrow stream was now a wide river. Luckily, his high-ground campsite was spared, but a new crisis emerged. His fire was dwindling. Upon inspection, he realized the soggy ground beneath it was sapping its heat. He relocated the fire, scraped away the waterlogged moss, and exposed the rocky layer below. Soon, the flames roared back to life. Next, he gathered armfuls of wood, leaning them against the tripod frame, and covering them with the removed moss as a makeshift roof. His shelter, neither windproof nor waterproof, was now complete. But the moment he stepped back, the crossbeam sagged under the weight. He hastily added a supporting log to reinforce it. With shelter, fire, and water secured, only food remained a challenge. Or so he thought. The next morning, disaster struck. The overburdened crossbeam snapped, nearly burying him in the collapse. Worse, sleet began falling. But if there's one thing about Ed Stafford, it's that the greater the crisis, the sharper he performs. With calm determination, Ed Stafford removed the collapsed wood and moss. He selected a sturdy log as the new crossbeam and repeated the previous day's process, stacking wood against the beam and covering it with moss for roofing. This time, the structure held firm. On the 5th day of survival, Ed searched the fjord shoreline for food. Lifting a rock, he discovered tiny crustaceans hiding beneath. Barely a mouthful, but protein nonetheless. Without hesitation, he popped them into his mouth. Continuing his search, he collected several snails and 2 geoducks. After roasting them over the fire for 10 minutes, a seafood feast was ready. First, he tasted the geoduck, crisp texture with a chicken-like flavor, packing more protein per bite than beef. Next, he cracked open the snails one by one, savoring each morsel before enjoying a well-earned rest. At dawn, his fire was dying again, this time from rain-dampened wood. Admitting defeat with his experimental fire pit design, he scavenged the forest for massive logs. Using 2 flat rocks as supports, he built a hollow, elongated fire pit. Tended carefully, it soon blazed fiercely, so intensely that it accidentally ignited part of his shelter. Fortunately, the damp materials prevented spreading flames. A week into the challenge, though surviving adequately, Ed pushed further in search of better provisions. At a coastal fjord, he anticipated abundant shellfish, only to stagger at the sight. The entire beach teemed with plump mussels. Transforming into a harvesting machine, he filled his fur hat to the brim. Bonus finds included sea lettuce and edible kelp. Back at camp, he grilled the seaweed first, using birch bark as a plate. The tart, crunchy sea lettuce made a perfect appetizer. Soon the mussels cooked through, their golden meat glistening invitingly. The first bite delivered unparalleled tenderness, prompting Ed to declare he could live here indefinitely. Post-feast, he lined his bed with fire-dried moss. Sinking into its cushioning embrace, he melted into the most comfortable sleep of the expedition. On extraction day, Ed prepared a signal fire, twisting dried grass into bundles. Wrapped in birch bark, he created slow-burning smoke torches. At the fjord's edge, he built a platformed pyre with spruce boughs. The billowing smoke column quickly guided the crew's boat ashore. Another successful challenge concluded.